Hey Booktube friends, it's Carrie. Thanks for joining me today. I do have 3 books to talk about this week. The first book I want to talk about is Vincent and Theo, the Van Gogh brothers by Deborah Heiligman. And this is a young adult nonfiction book that is based on 658 letters between the 2 brothers. So you really get to explore their relationship and also Vincent Van Gogh's journey to become an artist. This book was a very painful and heartbreaking account of Vincent Van Gogh's mental illness and his struggles to try to maintain his sanity and also find something that is his path in life. And it's clear from the letters and from this book that Theo is his champion, his supporter, and probably the most influential relationship that Vincent ever had in his life. And you do get to see a lot of the specifics throughout the letters of the money situation. So Theo is pretty much the breadwinner in the family, and he's not only supporting Vincent, but at times he's supporting their parents or helping out to support the parents as well. We do see Vincent's transition from a very zealous religious person who was pursuing a career in the church to this very brilliant but tormented artist. And I learned several things that I didn't know about Vincent. I'm not someone who is super interested in art and art history, but luckily I have a very artistic friend named Allison, and she actually read this before I did, and she highly recommended it. We do see the time period around his self-mutilation and the cutting off of his ear. He was actually living with another artist, and they had a very volatile relationship, and so in my mind, it's very plausible that that other artist, who was known to be a fencer, actually cut off Vincent's ear, and that Vincent, being the kind soul he was, did not want to implicate his friend in any sort of legal issue. So there's that. And then in the town where he commits suicide, there was actually a rumor about that event as well, because the gun was never found. Some people suggested that some children were actually tormenting Vincent and that the gun accidentally went off, whether the children were playing with it or he produced this gun. I don't know, but I think there are questions about especially the ear situation, the ear incident. And this book does a great job of not really speculating about the things that we don't know, but giving you some insight into this relationship. The hero of the story will actually be Theo's wife. She is really the person who champions Vincent's artwork. And if you're not familiar with the history, I won't tell you exactly what happens to Theo. He has some struggles of his own. Even though he becomes a successful art dealer, Vincent and Theo are kind of on the same path at certain points in their lives. For a long time, it was thought that Van Gogh never painted a portrait of his brother, but actually now we know that's not true. So on the back, you see these 2 portraits that for many years were thought to be self-portraits. Now we believe that this one is actually Vincent, and the gentleman in the straw hat is actually Theo, which is interesting because typically the straw hat was Vincent's style, so it's believed that they swapped hats, which that's displayed on the cover with the straw hat over Theo and the felt one over Vincent. So I would highly recommend this book. I think people who are interested in art would like it, and those that are not. I'm not particularly interested in it, and I found it very enjoyable, even though it was a bit dark. The second book that I read this week was an audiobook. It was called 12 Rules for Life by Jordan B. Peterson. I wasn't familiar with this author at all before checking out this audiobook, but apparently he is a professor of psychology, and I do think that people who are interested in psychology, ethics, and religion would enjoy this book. He uses a lot of biblical references, and it's not necessarily in a, preachy manner. He's not really trying to convert or proselytize, but he's using it more for historical context to a lot of the things that he's talking about. The beginning of this book started out really good for me. I agreed with a lot of the rules that the author laid out. Some of the rules that he included were to stand up straight and hold your shoulders back, and I do believe that posture and how you carry yourself, that is reflected back in how people treat you. So I did agree with that life rule. He also talked about treating yourself like someone you're responsible for helping, and a lot of the anecdotes that he gave for this I could definitely see happening. A lot of people take better care of their pets than they do of themselves, and so that was a very interesting rule to consider. And the next one was make friends with people who want the best for you. It's always nice to surround yourself with people who are positive and they don't bring any sort of negativity to any of your decisions or your goals. Another rule was assuming the person you're listening to might know something you don't. Sometimes we get so wrapped up into speaking and thinking about the next thing that we're going to say or the next thing that we're going to ask that we're not really listening. So I think that's something that a lot of people could work on. I believe it was one of Confucius's sayings that the wise man knows what he doesn't know. So essentially, and I'm probably messing that saying up, but essentially you recognize that there are things that you don't know, and acknowledging that other people, even if they're on a different journey from you, they have something valuable to bring to the table. And I always learn a lot from people, so that was a good one. About halfway through this book, though, it started to lose me a bit. There are a lot of anecdotes in this book, and at certain points in the audiobook, I forgot what the rule was, so I forgot what we were even talking about, and it was hard to tell how some of these anecdotes were actually going to tie back into any sort of life rule. This book did remind me a lot of Malcolm Gladwell's writing, so if you're into his work, you might enjoy this. The audiobook is narrated by the author, and towards the end of the book, it seemed a bit self-righteous, and the author actually started speaking in a very shrill manner, and I was actually running at the time and I had to turn the volume down. So this one was kind of a mixed review for me. I don't know if it's for everybody necessarily, but again, about halfway through it started to lose me. The last book that I read this week was The 4 Agreements, A Practical Guide to Personal Freedom, a Toltec Wisdom Book by Don Miguel Ruiz. And I actually heard about this book on Summer's channel over at Cozy Reading with Quaker Cats, and this was a long time ago. I put it on my want to read list a while ago, so I don't even remember what video it was or what exactly she said about it, but whatever she said about it made me want to read it. So I got the book, and as you can see, there's a lot of book tabs in here, so obviously I got something out of it. The author of this book was a doctor who had a near-death experience, which prompted him to go back to his roots and study shamanism and some of the Toltec traditions, which is something that kind of ran in his family, but he hadn't been interested in prior to his near-death experience. I know a lot of people are skeptical of some of these how-to books, especially these little ones that seem to be very simplistic and elementary, but I will say, even though this is a short work and the writing is a bit choppy and it is a bit elementary, it is a very powerful work. And I think the way it was written was maybe intentional. Because of the very simplistic writing, I didn't lose sight of the simple truths that this author was trying to expand upon, and that's something that the last book I talked about was lacking. I got kind of lost in the anecdotes, but with this one, it gives you 4 agreements for essentially finding your truth and living a happier life. The first one is to be impeccable with your word. So essentially this means not to gossip or put any sort of poison out into the universe, because usually that poison breeds more poison and it usually comes back to you. The second was don't take anything personally, and of course I think we've all heard this advice before. People will say what other people think of you is none of your business. I definitely agree with this, but it's something that's very hard to put in practice, so I think reading about it and contemplating that and how it impacts your life is something that is good to do. The third agreement is don't make assumptions, and of course I think we've all heard this one before. And the last one is to always do your best, especially with following these 4 agreements. One of the things that this book brings up is that in your whole life, no one has abused you more than you. A lot of people have a tendency to have negative self-talk, or if you have anxiety and you ruminate over things, that is something that this book addresses. And I found it to be very profound, very beautiful, and unpretentious. And I would highly recommend it. I'm definitely going to keep this one. Probably will read it again. I did receive my JFK coconut, so maybe in the next video I'll bring that out. So I was really excited to get my coconut paperweight. And I'm also excited to see a lot of you booktubers out there do the JFK Book Tag. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who watched the video, and also to those of you who are planning to do the tag or who have already done the tag. Kit over at Kit's World did the first one, so I will link that one in the description box if you're interested. But I hope everyone is having a great week, and if you've read any of these books, please shoot me a comment and just let me know what your thoughts were. Hopefully I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.